just my confidence. But I'm the best. I'm the best boxer. I'm already prediction. I am the king. Give me the title shot.
Welcome to Silly Whales. This is a mental health podcast. I don't know. Is it even mental health podcast at this point? It is just a podcast. We discuss things that might be a little bit unnerving, uncomfortable, like mental illness, mental health, neurodivergent and neurotypical behaviors, and things along those lines. This podcast is for everybody, but it might not be for you, and that is okay. Neither of us, myself, Alex Cupid, and my good friend Joe, we're not going to hunt you down because, as I've mentioned multiple times, we just can't hunt you down. We're not very good at hunting people down. So we're not going to try. Instead, we're going to invite you onto our little family style show and you can join in and you can feel a part of us, you know? Or you could just have an appropriate distance from us, and that is probably better, you know? Like, I've been thinking about parasocial relationships a lot recently, and I'm just like, you know?
Yeah,
That's scary.
I was starting to get that vibe as you were saying it. I was like, okay, where are we going with this?
Like, look, we might act like a cult, but it doesn't mean we are a cult, you know?
No.
You know? Like, being cult-like doesn't mean we're actually a cult, you know?
No. Let's not define it. In
Like,
case
I've told you the
it's bad for us.
Scientology story, right? I've told you the Scientology story, right?
No, I don't think so.
I didn't tell you about, like, when I was in year 6, I nearly became a Scientologist.
No? What?
Oh my goodness. Oh, it's to kick off this show. So, I probably can't mention his name because the Church of Scientology. But I was really close friends with a guy in my primary school. I was around like 10, 11 at the time. And it's go around to his house. We used to play Def Jam Vendetta on his GameCube. Ah, those are the days. Or PlayStation 2, one of those two. And life was great. Good friend. He used to live not too far from where all of the other guys who I then became friends with later on lived. He was a Scientologist, family was Scientologist, and like at the time, it didn't really like click. So he was like, "Come to the org. There's like an event, and it'll be great." And I had a tour of the org, and there was this like really big like event where all these people from like different just backgrounds and cultures were there. There was like black people, there was Sikh people, there was everybody there, like everybody. I don't know why I chose black and Sikh as the parameters of this, but you know, everybody was there. Um, and that like it was clear that there was affluent people there. And come to think of it now, the Church of Scientology building literally says Church of Scientology on it. And I didn't read it and go red flag. I didn't see any of it and go red flag. Probably because I was fucking 11 or 10. But yeah, I my mom had no clue either. Like I literally because I was gonna sign up. You have to pay money for it, and that was a stumbling block. Mom's like, I ain't paying money for this, and like
That's
if,
what the
if we had money, I'll be a Scientologist right now. I wouldn't. Oh, none of this would be happening. But yeah, like everyone was super nice, like super nice. Like everyone was like ridiculously nice. Like, and it was a genuine nice as well, which is unsettling because I look back at it and go, has anyone ever been? Have people been like that naturally kind to me since? like, like maybe it's not so bad, like,
I mean, to
maybe.
be fair, I was going to say, to be fair, Samson's church was a bit like that. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah.
Which I
Like,
mean, like that whole group. Like when I went to see him do a play because they did plays at the. I mean, is church the right word for it? By the way, I'm not quite sure because it was a smaller thing and it didn't happen at a church or anything. But I know it was obviously like Protestant
it was
Christian.
a church.
But
It was a
yeah,
church because the
it was a
pastor ran
church.
away with the money, like all these churches
Yeah,
tend to do. So
yes, that did happen. But I remember like I, I I think I had a very odd feeling at the time because I genuinely was kind of into it because of the feeling of inclusion that came with it, you know, and a lot of these people who were, my age, Samson's age, like being like just really warm and nice and like surprisingly in a way that I hadn't quite experienced like growing up of people around me because they're in this space, I suppose, where that makes more sense, or that's sort of pushed or whatever. And of course, there's a bunch of these people who were very genuine. I mean, these people who are my age were definitely genuinely like feeling that. I don't feel that there was any shadiness there or whatever. And it was startling almost to quite an intimate degree, not in a sexual way, but in a very platonic sense, like a proper sense of welcoming and so on, which I definitely think is something that should be pursued, maybe outside of, in our cases, religion. But but it was yeah. I kind of know what you mean, and it was unsettling, but not in like a bad way necessarily. But it really was like unusual, I would say, like
Yeah, like
weird.
it. So like even like Church of Scientology was really like I remember crying, being like, "Oh, I can't join because my family's broken," all that stuff. I like even now I think back on it and I go, it wouldn't have been that bad, you know. Like because one of the things that they claimed is that they could cure any unhappiness, and I remember that, and I was
Hmm.
like, "Oh, this is perfect." And I there was like a film presentation, and I remember it just being super like bright colors, but not like bright as in lime green or pink or whatever. It's colors like white, gold, silver, and like an
Yes.
eagle flying through, and it was all like, this is just another level. This is emotional, but also inspirational, and you kind of want to take on the world with them, not by yourself, with them. So that was that. But I was in contact with him for ages. I it literally it just came down to my secondary school life started, and then I saw him less and less, and then my wrestling career took off, and then I lost so many people from there. You know,
Yeah.
it's just yeah, like it was difficult. So I don't know where he is now. I hope he's doing good, but yeah, I don't know. But London Scientologists didn't seem that crazy, which means they probably were. I don't know. Who knows, eh? But yeah, like that was that.
Yeah. I
Bringing it
mean,
back to the present,
yes, yes.
um, how's your week been?
Um, there have been a few things that have come up. Um, I have realized I don't like work is becoming more and more of a thing I want to get away from. So I'm starting to feel that side of things. So I've been doing a lot more like searching for work and applying for things that I think I wouldn't normally apply for. But it's been actually weirdly enough, it has been more fun recently. I think just because I have a job, even though I'm not good with it at the moment. There's so much pleasure from looking for a job when you know you have a job and you're not unemployed. Like it's so much easier and so much more like I don't know. It feels, even though it's like obviously in your free time, it doesn't feel quite as much of a, a job trying to find a job, which on its own is incredibly depressing and not fun, especially when you're applying for stuff and you're like, I'm going to get a message at some point in the next week that told me I didn't get it or get nothing at all and just have to sit on my hands basically. But I mean, there's like a whole skill set you have to learn for finding jobs, which I'm still nowhere near mastering, but it's it's not great either way. Apart from that, I something quite something quite shocking, but ultimately has been fine. Was my mum, as you know, had an inflamed appendix and had to get an appendicitis, which there'd been scares before in the past. I don't know if I told you this, but there'd been scares in the past where she thought, or where they thought something might have happened. She went to the hospital and then scans showed that nothing was that bad, but eventually, like, it happened. So she had an operation on Saturday, and she's doing fine. In fact, to be perfectly honest, like the biggest thing for her right now is just, I mean, right now it's more painful than when it was at the time, as she was explaining to me today, it's because like you don't have like all of the anesthetic and the endorphins in you, and you're just dealing with bruises and shit like that in when not much is going on beyond that. Like she's not really
Yeah,
working quite as much at the moment. She can't even lift really anything. um like there's very strict things she has to do, and it's and she even said like she can't really walk like around the block kind of thing. Like she couldn't even do that. It's like something she's really looking forward to, and because it was keyhole surgery, she thought the recovery would be quicker. As it turned out, it hasn't been. So like not as quick as she wanted it to be. Like in her head, she like planned out like what she was going to do this week, since she's basically having this week off, and it didn't quite go that way. But she's doing fine. Like she works in she's an OT, occupational therapist, so she knows, she works in the NHS and stuff. Like it was her hospital even that she went to. It was all good, and she was slightly worried that she would have a lot of those worries. Um, like when she was in the situation, like potentially, she always kind of didn't like didn't want that to be the case. Obviously, no one does, but particularly in her situation, she didn't want to feel like that in a space that she, in theory, should feel comfortable in.
Yeah.
But as she said, like actually, she felt really comforted, and she even liked the food. So hats off to that. Um, and she even said like she wasn't given special treatment because a lot of the people that she was with didn't know who she was, because obviously very different sections of the hospital don't even know that each other exist.
Yeah.
So, but she's fine. She's just recovering now. Just needs to rest up, which she really hates being cooped up. It's like she's kind of not like me, where I can literally coop myself in for an entire week almost of time if things happen. Like gremlin or goblin mode it, or whatever it's called. Um, but she's like, as soon as she's in that space, she's like, she wants to go out, she wants to do something. So whenever she's like ill or something like that, it's the worst for her, because all she wants to do is do things, and she's not allowed to. So that's probably the biggest pain beyond the bruises right now, but the obvious bruises and post surgery. Yeah, but it's all been good. It's all been good for her anyway. So I'm happy. I think I said this to you because when I sent you the message telling me, just because it's irrelevant for like mental health and stuff, you asked me like, oh, how are you doing? When I told you, and I was like, I'm fine. Like, because I don't have like, because I know it's not so crazy. I knew that it was being taken care of, and I don't know, when it comes to like medical stuff specifically. Maybe it's just because of having my mum working in the NHS and stuff, but like we have in the family, we tend to have quite a different experience of like hospitals and um illness and injury and things like that. We like in where we have like a very dark, morbid humor about it. So like when my dad got prostate cancer, like most of the jokes were about oh, what happens to his money when he dies and things like this, and stuff like that. Like just stuff that to us is amusing, and we just don't have that kind of like, we don't quite have that negative problem. Obviously, if it was got more serious or something like that, then yeah. But obviously, my dad being Stoke or whatever, he didn't really, he wasn't too bad. And whenever I talked to him about it, he seemed fine. And I do trust my dad when he talks about things of that nature. Like I think there's certain things he might not tell me, but I think there's, generally speaking, he's pretty good on it. And when things are actually happening, the worst thing is when nothing is happening, when there's no, when the hospital is not getting back to you, or something gets pushed further and stuff, like all of the things that just produce this anxiety. Obviously, that all of those things aren't good. And if that had happened with him or my mum, obviously there would be a different. My mum didn't have to wait 2 days before getting surgery, for example. Friday night and then Saturday morning. That's what she had to deal with. So it was, aside from those situations, like generally pretty chill. And I've definitely inherited that from them too, in that sense. So it's been obviously I called her and I made sure she was okay, but largely speaking, we're pretty cool with that, I guess, which not everyone will experience, I know, but like it's odd when people always ask me like, oh, are you okay, or like what, or and I feel like other people worry more than I am in the moment when I talk about these things on occasion, and it's like, nah, it's all good. Like we're chilling, it's fine. The stuff that comes up later, which could be problematic or so on, we deal with that when we come to it. But most of the time, we're actually pretty laid back about the whole affair.
Yeah, like I've always liked your family's mentality of things, because it is the idea of, well, it's happened, so we're here. If it gets worse, we'll deal with it, but we're here now. So we might as well make the most of this and find the positives out of it. but also embrace the challenge of it, which is very much a way of looking at it that I don't think my family tend to do, or me as a human being. I tend to do the work my way through it bit, but the whole like find the positives out of it, no, not at all, man.
Yeah, and I've lost grandparents. You know, my gran had Parkinson's, and I knew her. I mean, I knew her for most of my life, with her being bedridden in a home. Most of that spent with her being essentially delirious all the time, in the sense that, and she couldn't really speak and stuff like that. And my brother doesn't even remember my gran before that happened. In so he knows her at the home, doesn't even remember her like walking around and stuff. Like I can remember being told that she had fallen over and like really hurt herself and so on. But she'd had Parkinson's for, I don't know, like 25 plus years by the time she died. Like it's insane. Like she had it for almost 10 years before I was born or something like that. So it was something that was definitely seen coming. And I've lost two grandparents, but both of them died when they were in their 90s. And my granddad right now is in his 90s. So, you know, apart from my grand who died, I think she was turning 80 maybe or something like that. So, you know, I've not had quite the I've not had such tragic like, you know, experience with all of that. And like I said, with stuff I talked about with my mum and her job and everything, like it's for us, it without even think. I don't think we even think like trying to find the positives in these. I think that's how we would describe it to people, but I think genuinely we have just become accustomed to that environment and not being bothered by it, or not having too much of an issue with it. I think because there's that genuine level of care that will always be there, where we'll always support each other regardless of what happens and as much as possible. And there's no worry there. And so it's like the worst parts of when these things happen to you, you like lose the ability to do certain things or whatever. I think, you know, definitely is helped. I like always thought about this. Like if I started getting dementia really early or something like that, or if I like, or if something happened to me tragically, like if I had like nerve problems or something, and I couldn't use my hands properly or whatever, and it would reduce what is capable of me doing in life and so on. Like things that are very debilitating. I I I I almost see them as like, in my head. I'm always like, oh, that would be interesting more than anything. Like even though I know how much it would affect me in when it happens or whatever, there's still a part of me that's like, huh, what is that experience like? You know, in a very, again,
I
morbid
am like,
curiosity sort of way.
take me to Dignitas, take me to fucking Switzerland, kill me now. Like,
Oh, oh yeah, my dad has made that joke about like, if he lives too long, he's like, oh, at some point, like, you know, take me to Sweden or Switzerland or wherever, and and just, you know, sort it out stuff. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I think honestly, the thing that puts him off is the amount of money you have to pay to get it all done.
like given that I want to go to Switzerland now, like at this age, like if I'm at a point in my life where I can't do anything and I get cabin fever for being in a room for more than 2 hours. So like it being in a building or confined to a room or a house for years because of a condition, no, we're not dealing with this, man. Like, you know, as dark as it is, like I smother me with a fucking pillow. Like do whatever. Like I cannot. I do not ever want to be in a situation where like I don't have my faculties or I don't understand what's going on.
I think it's interesting. I
Yeah,
thought about this because I don't know how. Obviously, almost no one knows what it's like to be in a position where you don't know what's happening, right? And you don't understand the world around you that way. So you know, I don't know how my obviously for my gran, like I don't know if I don't think she was mentally in a position where she could have thought like, oh, this is horrible in that way. Like she was clearly experiencing life and the world, but I don't know how she was experiencing it. And my other gran also was like quite, it's getting to a certain stage of like mental, into a certain mental state where, you know, with just age and degenerative disease and stuff like that, where it's really difficult to, I think it's really difficult to assess like what the what the experience would be like. Like, you know, if I saw you, like if randomly in 10 years one of us was in the position and was in this position and we saw one another, I don't know. I don't know if even talking to you now about it, I don't think my first thought would be, yeah, this is what Alex wants, because you're not you anymore in the same way. Like you haven't. There's a different sort of personality at some level there that has their own feeling about everything. So I think it's difficult for sure. I think it's why people do things like, that's why they obviously want people to say things like, if this happens, these are the things that if this happens to me, tell your family members, pull the plug, and whether you pull the plug or not, and other sorts of things like that, because they don't want because you can't make those decisions for yourself, and you certainly can't make certain decisions based on, the people can't make decisions for you on, or they have to, but it's very difficult to when you're in situations where like this is not necessarily even the same person anymore in that way. Um, I have a whole thing on identity and stuff, which we probably won't go into today. I really want to do a whole episode on identity because I think it's really interesting as a topic, and like how we mentally feel about things in a grander scale. Because obviously, I think what's interesting as well is that this is a scenario which almost everyone faces. When because everyone has had an experience like this where there is someone in their family or they even undergo it where identity becomes suddenly like a true crisis, and so on. And there are certain people who have identity crises for different reasons, but sometimes you have these really interesting moments where like there's sort of a natural way in which people come across this, and I think most people are completely are not ready for it. I think it's a very difficult thing for families and so on, because they've never even maybe never have even had to consider it or think about it before, and now it's suddenly become a very, very real topic of conversation. And you've heard the cliche, I think, of where it's like, oh no, my mum or my dad died, 5 years ago when this started happening or whatever, or you even have the opposite where it's like, they're still my mum or they're still my dad in that way, like either that very constant idea, or the very like they are no longer who they are at all, and so on, and they're almost like experiencing the loss already without them being dead, kind of thing, as
Yeah,
opposed to
yeah, for sure.
understanding that they are still a person, and this person and people are changeable anyway, and this is just an example of that. It's just obviously not the nicest one, because I mean, you can get paranoia, and like fear and paranoia is like a huge one that comes up for certain people in certain situations, and you obviously that's the thing you want to limit the most, and so on and so forth, where it does, where it's almost entirely, or if not completely negative. I mean, this is a really weird pull, but I just because this is relevant, I remember. Do you remember the poetry night we went to? I think it was the first one me and you went to. Yeah, in Dalston. Um,
Yeah.
and there was that woman who had a brain injury, and she had recovered from it, but her personality was completely different. And she did a poem that night, and she was talking about how she was enjoying her life more now than she ever had previously, and she was now like a really outgoing individual who was much more into like creative art stuff, whereas before that's not she wasn't interested in it ever. Which you can always tie a lot of these things to more so like the experience and shock of things happening to you. So it's not so I'm not stating like she had a brain injury and then her life got better. I don't mean it in that. I don't mean the brain injury caused it, but like she had a very clear injury that occurred. I can't remember what it was, and her life had changed from that point onward, and she was loving it. She was having the best time of her life. Obviously, she was young. That's obviously the best part of when that if it happens to you and you recover in some way, then obviously it's great
Yeah.
when you're young rather than when you're old, and
Well,
it's
they have it with fighters quite a lot as well. Like, now I'm entering the whole like fighting realm. Everyone's very quick to tell me, I hate everybody, man. Like the minute I do something, everyone becomes an expert of the field. So of
oh
course I
yeah,
have
yeah.
everybody telling me, well, if you get concussed, you might not ever be the same again. Look at this person. Look at this person. I'm just like, well, yeah, that's all well and good. But it's a phenomenon with fighters as well, where like the concussion syndrome changes who you are, and the most high-profile case is Chris Benoit. And
Yeah.
the uneducated people among us say, "Oh, it was the steroids that did it." and they're very quick to blame steroids, and they don't look any further. I remember ages ago, I was in a chip shop, and um, I just started wrestling, and this woman was like, "Oh, you're gonna become like that guy that killed his wife and his kid." And I was like, "What? Yeah, because you're gonna go on steroids." I'm like, "What?" Um, if you don't know, Chris Benoit is a professional wrestler, and he um committed the one of the most shocking atrocities ever. I can't remember which year it was in, but he had just finished like a run of shows. He went home, and he then uh, effectively just murdered his family, bar one child who wasn't there, and he then killed himself. And it was wild. It shocked the whole world, really, like the entire world. It wasn't even just like, oh, it shocked America. No, the world, because the WWE is a brand. Um,
Yeah, it was a really
it
high
then came
profile.
out. It then came out that he had the brain of like a 90 something year old Alzheimer's patient. So he was functioning and putting on excellent matches, like some incredible matches he put on. And he was doing this while literally not being a human being in the same
Mm,
way that everybody else is. He had moves like he had a diving headbutt, which like would rock your brain. He took a lot of really reckless, like uh, we call it bumps to his back, where he smacked his head off the canvas. And these are bumps that I've then taken in my. I did a flying headbutt for ages. Like
mm,
a lot of my moves are very much like at the time land on your back. And now I'm in Muay Thai, and I was in boxing. Everyone's telling me about like, oh, you're gonna get knocked out, and once you get knocked out, that's you over because your chin's gonna be weak, and then you can get knocked out even easier. Da, 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 da. And it's like, well, I don't view being knocked out as something that alters your life per se. Um, there's a big difference between being knocked unconscious and then having a traumatic brain injury.
mm,
Uh, in order for that to build up, you have to be knocked out like 50 or so times, man. And thinking about how fighters who we like Muhammad Ali, for example, being one of them, who now they speak. Well, when Muhammad Ali was alive, he had severe Parkinson's, and they changed. Their whole fighting style changed. Who they were changed because of the blows they took to the head, and it was so bad that it reached a point where Muhammad Ali couldn't speak.
mhm.
Like he couldn't speak.
Which is a tragedy.
That changed him. Yeah, because that's like what he was known for. And that links to identity, really. Like his identity got taken from him in that way. And I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there, but it made me think about like how when we talk about how people can change in front of us, like yeah, and a lot of it is circumstances, like just who we are and the position we put ourselves in. And a lot of it's to do with money. Like Muhammad Ali's last few fights where he took a lot of damage was down to him needing money.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, there's the anti-capitalist in me, right? Seeing fighters go through like absolute wars with themselves, not even with their opponents, with themselves, to only like still not be able to reap the benefits of having that money. But yeah, I don't know.
Request not to title this podcast episode Chris Benoit. Just
Oh my goodness.
it was in 2007, which I and I, re- I don't remember being told about. I remember hearing it later on. I think that had happened, but it was huge. Like it was a massive thing.
Yeah, it
And
was it was it was scary.
yeah, and I mean, did the WWE change certain things about kinds of moves they would do as a result? I'm trying to remember this now. Like I thought there
So
was something they did different.
what happened is they kind of like so when it first happened, they paid tribute to him, and they like had the whole 10 bell salute, and then it came out what actually transpired. So they kind of erased Chris Benoit from like history, and he's
Yes.
not really visible anywhere. His matches are still available, but you can't like search and find him on like the WWE network and things like that. He's not really acknowledged by the WWE, which is you can see why, but it's also quite sad because again, like the WWE kind of made the environment for that to flourish in, for him to then put himself through that stress. Yeah, they introduced like multiple things like concussion protocols, as well as enhanced drug testing, and like things like the wellness program was introduced after him and Eddie Guerrero's passing, as well as other like former WWE superstars either becoming seriously ill or dying. Um, a lot of it was from things like suicide or from heart attacks and things like that. Things that now we're seeing bodybuilders collapse and die with. So I would say that the wellness program from WWE does have a benefit. Pretty much what it did, it made a lot of people question the recklessness of like professional wrestling. So things like unprotected chair shots, like a steel chair. A lot of people think steel chairs are like just like flimsy pieces of like plasticky metal. No, they're full metal. Like I took a protected chair shot to the head, and I didn't protect myself well enough, and I felt that shit for days. Um, then moves like power drivers, like how can we make these safer? And these are all common sense things, but when you're on the road traveling, you're just happy to make it. So you
Yeah.
don't you don't really care. So then I don't know, man. I think that like me stopping wrestling was probably a good thing, because I felt like I was taking stupid bumps every single. It was getting like the bigger the show, the more I want to do something a little bit like riskier and riskier.
Mhm.
So I think I was on like 2 concussions already, and I think, in my opinion, 5 concussions, and you should probably look to call it a day. Um, Being concussed is a normality though in combat sports, but if you're in the entertainment industry, you shouldn't be putting yourself through that much strain, especially your brain. Uh, but yeah, so a lot of it was just analysis of how they could make things safer, and some of it was taken aboard, some of it wasn't. But the key thing was like the study of his brain,
Mhm.
and how like and what it resembled as well. Because for me, it resembles more than just his brain was pretty much mush. It resembles a guy who literally left everything on the canvas of a wrestling ring,
I think it's
and
also
his I
really no. Sorry, you finish. I thought you'd finish, but
no,
go
it's,
for
like
it.
his identity was that of a professional wrestler. It wasn't of anything else.
Mhm. Yeah, like I can't think of Chris Benoit outside of that, and I don't think anyone who ever brings up the name Chris Benoit is ever meaning it outside of specifically the murder suicide. Like that's all they can talk about, or that's all that everyone knows him for, pretty much. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's. I mean, this is true with like American football, right? Isn't this like a huge thing with American football that over the
yeah, yeah.
last 10 years has become much more talked about at the very least? Like just the.
Yeah, CTE, man. Like,
Mhm.
just it's just a lot of like crimes that are committed by American footballers. Like, it's all linked to this, like CTE. Like, we have multiple footballers, and not I say footballers, American footballers who, their behavior now, everyone just goes, oh, CTE, but no one actually does anything. Like, I think Antonio Brown is a case where people go, oh, CTE because he does lots of wacky shit. Um, we've had guys commit murders and just unspeakable acts randomly as well. Like, it's like a split second, bam, and he has just done the worst thing in the world. Great, and UFC fighters as well, which again, it's entering a realm which I know a lot about, because it's a realm that I do want to be involved in, where um they they've taken so many blows to the head that they end up losing themselves, really. And
Mm.
I really don't want to go through that, and I really don't want to be that. And I like to think that I know when to call it quits. Thinking about like my future Muay Thai career, I say it with optimism because I want there to be one. Uh, I have a feeling that I'm gonna get really annoyed with people um, throughout throughout my Muay Thai career. 'Cause I feel like I'll take one hit and everyone be like, retire, 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 retire. Like, I don't know when to call it quits. Um,
I think you do have to have like
what?
a pre-prepared notion of what like at what point will you, because you I mean in the same sort of vein, you don't really want to rely on the state you might be in then for you to decide when to quit or to stop, right? You kind of want to have an idea already set and people almost know, so that they can talk to you about it when it starts happening. Like I don't know what that would be,
Yeah,
is the thing. That's the difficult part,
I
because
had to I had a conversation with myself about it, because I was like, if I have a conversation with myself about it while I'm like starting my amateur fight career, it's going to be really skewed, and I'm going to
Mhm.
say like this amount. But if I have it now before I even get started, then we could have like an objective viewpoint, and it might be unrealistic, but at least there was an objective viewpoint. And I said like if I have 3 KO defeats, like 3 just I get sparked out, we're calling it quits because it's clear that I'm just not up to the standard to compete, but also it's clear that I'm in danger because I've my brain has shut down and restarted 3 times.
Mhm.
Um, if I lose 3 times in a row, though, I'm fine. Like if I lose 3 times by like decision and I don't take too much damage, I just lose because I was shit. Fine, we can go again. But 3 straight KO defeats or like 3 fights where I just take significant damage and it's clear that I'm not the same fighter as I was the last fight beforehand, then you've got to hang it up because no money's worth it and it only gets worse from there.
Yeah, I mean, you do have. I think you do have to have at least have a hard. I mean, obviously, it's easy to have like a hard thing like that, right? Like a hard no, like or hard stop of being of that. So that
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's still good to have that, even if you don't have like a nuanced one, because again, it's difficult to come up with a nuanced version of that. You'd have to
yeah.
be
Like
both. You'd have to be very aware of what might happen, but also in the moment, you'd have to
tell
be able to
like speak
say,
to the future.
yeah,
Like the nuanced version of it is if I do take a lot of damage, like over a period of fights, then I would assess and I would know. And the reason why I would know is because I'm someone who very much believes in making sure you're good for yourself, but also good for the people who you want to be good for. So
mhm.
I, I also know that comes with the caveat of they will annoy me. Like if I get hit with like a flash KO and I get like hit with a head kick and it's a highlight reel knockout, I'm gonna have like you saying retire. I'm gonna have family saying retire. Like whatever girl or guy I'm with saying retire. I'm just like, Jesus Christ. Like, and it's gonna piss me off. It's gonna annoy me, and I have to be able to then split between understanding that people care and also understanding that they know absolutely nothing. Like, and finding nuance between them two of maybe they're right or maybe they're wrong and figuring out that battle.
Yeah, I
So
mean, unless it was really serious, I don't think I'd ever say like don't like as harshly. I think if I'm saying it harshly, I think you would have come to that conclusion. But
yeah,
I I could definitely see a scenario in which I'm in your best interest in my mind. I'm like, okay, I think this is something we need to think about, you know, and it would be. I think that would even be frustrating to hear because obviously in the environment you don't want to be hearing that kind of thing if especially if you're doing it competitively, that's not
yeah,
that's not the kind of vibe and energy and atmosphere that you want from people who are close to you, who are like doubting you in a way. And I mean, that's just that's even outside of fighting. I would even argue that that's something that people come across all the time. People saying like you
yeah,
should stop
all
doing
the
this,
time.
or this is making you sad, or this is not like this isn't worth it. Like I want you to I'd rather have the person who doesn't do what, especially because uh, so much can be pent up and like internalized about like why you're doing something and whether it's good enough or not, or like that's what makes you worthwhile, or and so on and so forth. Like so much of that can be bundled up in these things. So it's not to say that it's even specifically just a fight thing. Like I think this is definitely something that loads of people have had conversations about. When
Yeah,
when
all the
when
time, man.
especially when you start getting older, like these things are going to come up. So it's a
I
harsh
hate
discussion, but
I hate being like limited or told that like what I can and can't do.
mhm.
Um, like I actually remember it like with like Kestis, our good friend Kestis. When we were in
Oh
the
yes.
common, and it was yeah, like that conversation because it's really annoying. Like, I hate being told like the limitations of something that like especially when no one knows the limitations of it. Pretty much. Long story short, like uh, we like me and my then girlfriend at the time just had different viewpoints of where we wanted to go to him, and he was like, "Well, your way is shit, and you shouldn't do it." And we were like, "It's fine." And he was adamant that he was right, and here we are about 10 plus years later, and we're both wrong. So um, he's not a psychologist, and I I actually don't know what my thing was at the time. So do you know what? Maybe it was becoming a football coach. In which case, then I've won. But it was a very shallow, hollow victory. So no one won.
Yeah,
Everybody loses.
yeah, obviously, like conversations like that aren't ever good, really. I think I always try to be someone in a conversation where I'm never like outright positing that something is just straight up bad. Like I always couch most of the stuff I'm saying in, if these are the kinds of things you want, I think this is correct. If this is what you want, then and if this is what you want, then I can understand where you're coming from, even if I don't know if it's the right idea or not, or the best idea. Like talk about communication. Holy shit! Like that's something that everyone fucking does. Like they speak their mind and not realize the impact that they're having on the person that they're talking with, or even just how to give information in a way that's palatable.
Yeah, 100%.
Because that's because it's so it's really easy to say what you want to say, and it's really easy to it's really easy to think you know all of the information that is necessary to know, because it's only what convinces you, not what convinces anyone else. And especially when that person, when what you're talking about is like what someone wants to do, or something like that, especially when it's not, super fucked up, and it's something as simple as like what kind of job you want to do. Like the,
Yeah.
people can really run with it, and ultimately like make decisions as though it's like, oh, if would I want to do it? No. And it's like, or would it be good for me? No. And it's like, well, it's not about you. You're not the person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. Like, hey, I'm gonna force what I feel onto you, despite me not having any idea what you actually want to do. But yeah, like I just realized we've been doing this for 46 minutes, and I haven't actually said about how my week has been. I spoke about Scientology. Um,
Oh,
week
true.
has
Yeah.
been a week. Week has been a week. It's been one of the many weeks.
You have a
It's been
dog?
a week of. I do. That's not even new though.
No, but did we speak about like your experience with that, or like what's the?
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
I don't think we actually have. She's a cunt. And that's that. uh,
okay,
um, no, she's delightful. Um, but yeah, I think we have our clip for the YouTube.
great.
um, but yeah, cool. That's that. Really, it's been one of the many weeks of the year. Same old, same old. We're still struggling, but we'll get there. It's what it is.
Hey,
But yeah,
anytime, just let me know.
yeah. But we're here. Same for you. Um, thank you guys for listening. If you made it this far, I think are we done?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's good.
Yeah, that easy. Um, I'm gonna start to include links to services like Samaritans now. I think it's good. I've had a talk with myself about it, but yeah. So that'll be in the description, as well as our email, as well as my Instagram. Follow us on all those things. Hit us up if you want to say anything, have something on your mind, or if you have a question, whatever. I don't know, man. I don't know. You
Yeah.
tell me, okay? But yeah. We're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. See ya.
Ciao.